Welcome back to The Rundown. Noa Tishby first achieved fame in Israel in the 1990s, a star of the hit television series Ramat Aviv Gimel. She later moved to Los Angeles to pursue her acting, but then started another career as a producer by steering the HBO adaptation of the Israeli series In Treatment and helping launch this current international renaissance of Israeli television. While living in the U.S., Tishby, by virtue of being an Israeli, also found herself increasingly becoming an advocate of sorts for the Jewish state and Zionism, answering and contending with misinformation, prejudice, sometimes just plain ignorance about her homeland. Now she's taken that role to a whole new level, authoring a new book out this week called Israel, a simple guide to the most misunderstood country on earth. And joining us from Los Angeles is model, actress, producer Noa Tishby. Noa, thanks for joining us on i24 News. So first of all, let me ask.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let me ask you, like I said, you have done advocacy for Israel, but you are now raising it to a new level with a book, which I could describe maybe as part history lesson, part political tract, part autobiography. Why take this step?
Why take this step? The reason I wrote the book is because I've been looking for this book. Okay, so as an Israeli or a Jew, we get asked all the time to voice our opinion about Israel. And sometimes it can be a little complicated. And we find ourselves often kind of thinking, wow, I wish I had, what happened back then? Where is that story? Why does this make sense? And I've been asked many times from people, like, do you have a book to let me read? Do you have something to give me to read? And I would say, yeah, of course. And like point them to all these amazing historical books that have been around for many, many years. But what I found out is that people need it in a quicker, in a more relatable way, and they need it in a way that's fun to read. And I couldn't find that book. I just couldn't find that book. And I travel in a lot of liberal circles. I have a lot of young people around me, obviously, and this book doesn't exist. So I thought, okay, well, better write it then. And I did.
Right. Now, you say you travel in some liberal circles. You're there in Hollywood. You do give some examples of the book of some of the misinformation you've encountered. You don't name too many names, but in recent interviews, you, for example, called out Seth Rogen, who on a podcast said Israel doesn't make sense to him as a country. I mean, how much of that is specifically there in the Los Angeles, Hollywood milieu have you encountered as an Israeli?
I have a lot. So starting from people who would come to me and be like, oh, I'm such a huge supporter of Israel. And then I'd ask them, would you tweet about it? And they go, no, prefer to stay out of this, right? So that's number one. And then you hear Hollywood people, some of them Jews, express like support for BDS, like Sarah Silverman did recently. And I'm like, I'm not sure she knows exactly what BDS is about. I'm not sure she realizes that BDS is a movement that want Israel to not exist. I'm pretty sure she doesn't know who they're financing, like who's financing the movement. And these are things that I wanted to tackle in my book. I mean, BDS, I'm taking them on. I'm taking them on. I'm taking them to court right there. And I'm very curious to hear what people think about this when I, basically use the cunning use of facts to point out who they are. And in terms of Seth Rogen, the thing is this, right? I understand when because he claims that he was fed kind of like propaganda and his parents did not tell him the truth about Israel. And I'm like, okay, that's a valid criticism for your parents. That's fine. But the thing is this, if you are Jewish and you don't understand that there is a part of your confidence in the world and part of the resiliency and the calm that the Jewish people have right now living like all over the world is the subconscious knowledge and confidence that there's a state. There's a state, there's a military, there's a Jewish state. And I think people like Seth Rogen take Israel for granted. And I think that is a terrible, terrible mistake.
Right. Now, you describe yourself in the book as a liberal, even a leftist, but you're also a proud Israeli Jew and Zionist. It seems in the U.S., where the issue of Israel, like everything else, is becoming increasingly partisan and polarized, that may be a sort of shrinking, small and shrinking area of real estate on the political landscape. How do you navigate that? It looks like you have to walk quite a fine line there.
I'm curious to see what people think of the book, because I used to describe it when I've been in the writing process that every 3 sentences is a landmine. Like every 3 sentences, like, oh my God, I'm touching this subject now. That's insane. The thing is this, right? Being a Zionist, being a pro-Israel, you are also pro-Palestinian, and being a liberal, if you are a person who likes democracy, any kind of freedoms of any sort, human rights, women's rights, LGBTQ plus rights, and you're not supporting Israel within the context of the Middle East, you're making a mistake. Like, this is a mistake. So I think that and by the way, I describe myself in terms of American politics, I'm a registered independent. So yeah, I'm a liberal in all social causes, but I'm strong on defense. I'm strong, so it's not black and white in that sense, but Zionist values are liberal values. So to me, being able to actually redefine this and reclaim the word Zionism and not have it reappropriated by radicals, especially on the left, unfortunately, and to become a slur, right? And owning it proudly and be like, yeah, I'm a Zionist, I'm pro-Israeli, I'm pro-Palestinian, I'm pro-peace. Let's get the facts straight so we can actually create a new reality in the Middle East.
Right. Now, you are an Israeli. You were born and raised here. I know you spend time and you still do some work here, but you do live primarily in the United States. Now, in your book, you are not afraid to go into what some might call internal Israeli issues. You talk especially about the influence of the ultra-Orthodox or Haredi Jewish population. You wade into that debate. You do, as you mentioned, talk about the Palestinians, and you give your views on settlements and debates you've had with figures like Ayelet Shaked. How are you going to respond to those people who say, okay, it's okay to defend Israel as a concept and overall as a country, but since you've decided to live in the States, maybe you shouldn't wade into things that are really directly impacting the people living here?
I think, generally speaking, I've been in the public eye in Israel for a very long time. I've been very blessed, and I love the fact that I've been able to do that. The people in Israel, they know how much of an Israeli I am. כאילו, אני מדברת עכשיו בעברית לישראלים, they get it, right? So I'm not at all concerned about that. I also live between both countries. So I'm based in LA and I go to Israel a lot and I still work over there. And I define myself as 100% Israeli and 100% American. The reason it was important for me to touch upon these issues is, first of all, because this is a unique point of view that Israeli Americans have that maybe the American audience didn't get a chance to see yet in this kind of way. And it was important for me. I didn't write a propaganda book. I wrote a book that actually talks about the story of Israel, and to not discuss the settlements and not discuss the Haredis and not talk about the sectarian demons and all this, like the fabric of society in Israel, would be ignoring reality and not giving people all the facts and the spectrum. And I think that, first of all, I think it's important. And second, well, I think it's interesting, but also this is what will hopefully give my readers the calm feeling that I am not, I'm obviously, it's a pro-Israel book, shamelessly. Right. But it's okay to weigh in on things that are challenging. And what I talk about the Haredi people within Israel, I think it's a challenge. It's an actual challenge, and it needs to be addressed internally within Israel. But it's important for people who want to get their facts and wrap their head around Israel. It's important to give them these tools as well.
Right. Now, as I mentioned in my introduction, you did help jumpstart this renaissance of Israeli television by bringing In Treatment to the notice of HBO, which then made an American version of it. We've now reached the point where, thanks especially to Netflix and other streaming services, Israeli TV shows in their original form are played. Shows like Fowder and Shtisel and Prisoners of War, which was the original of Homeland. I'm curious how much you think these kind of programs help in the effort that you are describing more directly in your book. In other words, making people aware about Israel in all of its complexities, all of its flaws, and also all of its virtues.
I think it helps tremendously. I really do. Look, at the end of the day, people love good stories, and any good story is worthwhile. And as long as it's authentic and relatable, it moves the ball forward. And I think, look, shows like Fauda, I think one of the extraordinary things about Fauda is how it brought the Arab world into the mix. And I spoke to Lior Raz many times about this, how he has all these fans from all over the region, and they're seeing Israel differently, and they're seeing the conflict differently. And this is, look, book. It's what we need to do. We need to tell personal stories, authentic stories. This was the reason that my editor at Simon & Schuster for the book pushed me a lot to insert myself more, to tell more personal stories. My family was very involved in the Zionist movement. My family was involved in establishing the country. And my editor kept saying, like, I want to hear more about your grandmother and your great grandfather, and like, talk more about this, more about that. And which I think is an amazing. I'm so happy she did that, because from what I'm getting from people, this is it's not a history book. It's a her story book.
Right.
And it makes it, you get all the facts, you get everything, you get all the ammunition you need in order to talk to people and have an educated conversation. But it's done in a way, it's spoken from my heart and from my experience and from my family's experience. And I'm glad my editor made me do this, because I think it works.
Right, and one of the things you point out, you have a grandfather who was an ambassador and other members of your family who were Zionist activists. Now, I'm going to presume you're going to be doing many more interviews like this. You maybe will do. Now, I don't know what the coronavirus situation will allow you, but you will do perhaps some kind of appearances and book tours. But you know that people who speak out for Israel sometimes wade into difficult situations. How prepared and ready are you for that, and the fact that that is going to some degree, define you, at least for the short term, once you go out and start promoting the book?
I can't wait. I can't wait. I'm basically luring Roger Waters into like a Twitter war. He's a huge supporter of BDS. I can't wait. I can dismantle pretty much every argument against Israel. And I'm very much looking forward to having these thoughtful, value-based conversation, not this like branded, don't want to use the word fake news because it's been reappropriated inappropriately, but like if you don't have your facts straight, try to get off of Twitter. Okay, that's the bottom line. And it's okay to have a conversation about policies. It's okay to have a conversation about governments, but it's not okay to deny Israel's right to exist, to be safe. It's not right to support BDS without knowing what they're about. And I'm looking forward to be able to be out there and have as many conversations with people, including adversaries.
Just briefly, you say conversations. You understand that there may not, some of these may not be conversations. Some of them may be. Okay. You're ready for that? Yeah, I am. I'm getting crap online, and I'm like, it's fine. People are, we live in a world in which everybody has an opinion and everybody has a way to voice their opinion and to speak up. And I'm like, great, bring it on. All right. Well, I guess having worked as an actress and being in Hollywood, you must develop to some degree a thick skin and ready for all kind of things. I'm very used to being rejected. It's fine. I'm not scared of your Twitter storms. Okay. Noa Tishby, the book is Israel, A Simple Guide to the Most Misunderstood Country on Earth. Thank you for joining us on i24 News. Thank you so much for having me.